Captain Hunwell pressed his palm against the cold metal wall of the observation deck and stared into the endless black of space. 50 years had passed since the first alien ships appeared over Earth, and still the sight of them made his stomach twist. 3 massive vessels hung in the darkness beyond the monitoring station, their hulls gleaming with an unnatural blue light that hurt to look at directly. The Veltar ships never moved, never communicated, never did anything except watch and wait. The monitoring station had been his home for 8 years now. Built at the very edge of the Sol system, it served as humanity's prison guard and their only window to the galaxy beyond. Hunwell had volunteered for this assignment because someone had to do it, and because he remembered what happened the last time humans tried to ignore the aliens watching them. "Captain, we have movement on the outer sensors," called engineer Kim Dayun from her station. Her voice was steady, but Hunwell could hear the tension underneath. After 8 years of the same routine, any change felt dangerous. Hunwell moved to the main display screen. 3 green dots represented the Veltar ships, unchanged for months. But now a 4th dot was approaching from deep space, moving fast. Too fast for any human ship. "How long until it reaches us?" Hunwell asked. 26 hours at current speed, Dayun replied. She was young, maybe 25, with the kind of quick mind that made her perfect for working with alien technology. "The energy signature is different from the Veltar ships. Bigger." Hunwell nodded and activated the communication system. "Get me Dr. Somin. Tell her we need her up here now." Dr. Somin arrived 15 minutes later, still wearing her lab coat, and carrying a tablet covered in alien symbols. She had been studying alien biology for 12 years, ever since the Terran Containment Pact had been signed. Her work was officially classified as peaceful research, but everyone knew she was really trying to figure out why the galaxy was so afraid of humans. "What do we have?" she asked, looking at the display. "Unknown ship approaching." "Not Veltar?" Hunwell said. "What do you think?" Somin studied the readings on her tablet. "The energy output is massive. Whatever this is, it's much larger than anything we've seen before. Could be a new species wanting to meet us. Or it could be someone coming to check on their prisoners," Hunwell said. The thought hung in the air between them. The Terran containment Pact was supposed to protect humanity from the dangerous influences of galactic civilization. In reality, everyone knew it was the other way around. The galaxy needed protection from humans. It had all started 50 years ago with what the history books called First Contact. 3 alien fleets had arrived at Earth without warning, demanding immediate surrender to something called the Galactic Pact. They claimed humans were too dangerous to exist freely in the galaxy. When Earth's governments refused, the aliens attacked. The war lasted 6 months. By the end, 2 of the alien fleets were completely destroyed, and the 3rd had lost half its ships. Earth was burning, but humanity had won. The victory terrified the galaxy more than any defeat could have. The Terran Containment Pact came next. Humanity could keep their home system, but they could never leave it. In exchange, the galaxy would protect them from outside threats and provide limited technology and trade. It was a prison sentence disguised as a peace treaty. "Dr. Somin," Dayun called from her station. "I'm getting communication signals from the approaching ship. They're asking for permission to dock." Somin raised her eyebrows. "That's new. The Veltar never asked permission for anything." Hunwell moved to the communication station. "Put them through." The main screen flickered and showed a face that was definitely not human. The creature had large, multifaceted eyes like an insect, but its head was more rounded, almost bird-like. When it spoke, its voice came through the translation system as perfectly clear English. "Greetings, humans of the monitoring station. I am Speaker Vexhai of the Veltar Diplomatic Corps. I request permission to board your station on a matter of great importance to all species in the galaxy." Hunwell looked at Somin, who nodded slowly. They had been waiting 50 years for something like this. "Permission granted, Speaker Vexhai. Docking Bay 2 is prepared for your arrival." The alien ship was beautiful in a way that made Hunwell's teeth ache. Its hull curved and flowed like living tissue, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. As it settled into the docking bay, he could see smaller Veltar moving around inside through transparent sections of the hull. Speaker Vexhai arrived with 2 guards, all 3 wearing what looked like living armor that pulsed with soft light. The speaker was taller than the guards, with more elaborate patterns on its carapace. When it spoke, its mouthparts moved in ways that didn't match the translated words. "Captain Han-Wol, Dr. So-min, Engineer Kim Da-yoon," the speaker said. "Somehow, knowing all their names without being told, I bring a message from the Galactic Council. Your species has been requested to attend a special session." "Requested?" So-min asked. "Humans haven't been allowed to attend council sessions since the Pact was signed." "The situation has changed," Vexhai replied. "A new threat has emerged that challenges all life in the galaxy. The Council believes humanity may be uniquely qualified to address this threat." Han-Wol felt his muscles tense. What kind of threat? Something that consumes entire star systems and leaves nothing behind. Something that our greatest military forces cannot stop. Something that requires the kind of response that only a Deathworld species might provide. The word hung in the air, like a curse. Deathworld. That was what the galaxy called Earth, and by extension, what they called humans. In galactic terms, most species evolved on garden worlds with mild climates and few predators. Earth, with its extreme weather, natural disasters, and countless ways to die, was considered one of the most hostile planets ever discovered. "You want us to fight your war," Han-Wol said. "We want you to consider fighting our war," Vexhai corrected. "The decision is yours. But I must tell you that this threat has already consumed 17 star systems in the Outer Rim. If it continues unchecked, it will reach the core worlds within 50 years. So-min stepped forward. "What makes you think we can succeed where your military has failed?" The speaker's large eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her want to step back. "Because you are what we have spent 50 years trying to contain. Because you come from a world that taught you to survive by destroying your enemies completely. Because when faced with extinction, your species does not retreat or negotiate, you attack." The truth of it hit Han-Wol like a physical blow. The galaxy had built the Pact to keep humans contained because they were afraid. Not afraid of human technology or human numbers, but afraid of what humans would do when pushed to the edge. The alien military forces were designed for precision conflicts between civilized species. They had rules, protocols, limits on acceptable losses. Humans had no such limits. "We need time to consider this," Han-Wol said finally. "Of course, but do not take too long. The enemy does not wait, and neither can we." Vexhai turned toward the docking bay, then paused. "There is one more thing you should know. Some members of the Council believe this threat was sent specifically to test us, to see if we are worthy of survival. If that is true, then failing this test means more than defeat. It means the end of all galactic civilization." As the Veltar ship disappeared into deep space, Han-Wol stood in the observation deck and wondered if humanity was about to trade one prison for another. But this time, the bars would be made of war and death, and the key would be everything that made the galaxy afraid of Deathworlders in the first place. Ambassador Li Qiang had never seen so many different alien species in one place. The Galactic Council chamber stretched out before him like a vast amphitheater, with hundreds of delegates arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Each species had their own section, their own atmosphere controls, their own way of communicating with the translation systems that made this gathering possible. Li Qiang sat in what was clearly the worst section of the chamber, high up in the back where the artificial gravity felt wrong and the air tasted stale. The human delegation consisted of exactly 3 people: himself, Dr. So-min, and Commander Park Jun. 50 years of isolation had left humanity with very few trained diplomats. "Can you understand any of this?" Park Jun whispered, gesturing at the chaos below. Dozens of species were talking at once, their voices creating a buzzing wall of sound that the translation system struggled to process. "Not much," Li Qiang admitted, "but I think they're scared." He was right. Even without understanding the individual conversations, the body language was clear. The tall, crystalline beings of the Orion Collective kept their light patterns dim and defensive. The amphibious delegates from the hegemony clustered together in tight groups, their skin colors shifting through nervous patterns. Even the proud Veltar seemed agitated, their antennae twitching constantly. A deep tone echoed through the chamber, and slowly the noise died down. A massive holographic display activated above the central platform, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Large sections of the outer rim glowed angry red. "Honored delegates," came a voice from the translation system. Li Qiang couldn't tell which species was speaking, but the formal tone suggested someone important. "We gathered today to address a threat unlike any our civilization has faced. What you see marked in red represents star systems that have been completely consumed by an enemy we have designated as the Devourers." The map zoomed in on one of the red sections. Where there should have been stars and planets, there was nothing. Not even debris or radiation signatures? Just empty space, as if entire solar systems had been erased from existence. 17 systems have been lost in the past 6 months, the voice continued. Our best estimates suggest the Devourers will reach the Middle Rim worlds within 2 years if their advance continues unchecked. Dr. Somin leaned forward in her seat. How is that possible? You can't just make matter disappear. Several alien delegates turned to look at the human section. Li Qiang realized Somin had spoken loud enough for the translation system to pick up her words. The human asks a relevant question, said a new voice, this one clearly belonging to one of the crystalline Orion beings. Our scientists believe the Devourers do not destroy matter in the traditional sense. They appear to convert it into pure energy, which they then use to power their expansion. What kind of ships are we dealing with? Commander Park Jun asked. How big are their fleets? This time the pause was longer. When the answer came, it was from a Veltar delegate. That is part of what makes this enemy so dangerous. They do not use ships as we understand them. Our scouts report massive biological constructs, some larger than moons, that seem to be alive. They move through space without any visible propulsion and show no response to our attempts at communication. The holographic display changed, showing fuzzy surveillance images of the Devourers. Li Qiang had to suppress a shudder. The things in the images looked like enormous parasites, all reaching tentacles and gaping mouths filled with rows of teeth. They moved through space like swimming through water, their massive forms pulsing with dark energy. Our combined fleets have engaged the Devourers on 7 separate occasions, another voice reported. Each time, our forces were completely overwhelmed. The enemy adapts to our weapons with incredible speed. Energy weapons that worked in the first battle were useless in the second. Projectile weapons stopped being effective after the third encounter. What about your ground forces? Park Jun asked. The question seemed to confuse several delegates. Finally, a hegemony representative answered. Ground forces? The Devourers consume entire planets. There are no ground battles. Li Qiang could see Park Jun's expression change. The commander had spent his career studying alien military doctrine, and he was clearly realizing something important. You've been fighting them in space, Park Jun said slowly. Long-range engagements with energy weapons and guided projectiles. Clean, efficient warfare. Of course, replied an Orion delegate. How else would one conduct military operations? By getting close enough to hurt them, Park Jun said. By making them bleed. The chamber fell silent. When the responses came, they carried a note of horror that the translation system couldn't quite hide. Such tactics would result in unacceptable casualties, said a Veltar speaker. The destruction of ships and crews is to be minimized at all costs, added an Orion voice. Military action must preserve the maximum number of lives while achieving strategic objectives, concluded a hegemony delegate. Dr. Somin looked at Li Qiang with understanding in her eyes. They don't know how to fight a war, she whispered. They know how to have a military disagreement. Li Qiang nodded. It made sense now why humanity had been so successful in the war 50 years ago. The alien fleets had expected a civilized conflict with rules and limits. Instead, they had encountered an enemy that would ram ships into their formations, detonate nuclear weapons at point-blank range, and turn every engagement into a desperate struggle for survival. This is why we have asked humanity to attend this. Council, said the original voice. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that other civilizations lack. You understand warfare in ways that we do not. You want us to be your attack dogs, Li Kyung said, standing up so his voice would carry clearly through the chamber. You want us to do the dirty work that you're too civilized to do yourselves. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, a Veltar delegate responded. We want you to do what you do best, what your Deathworld taught you to do. We want you to survive by making sure your enemies do not. And what do we get in return? Li Kyung asked. Freedom, came the immediate reply. The Terran containment? Pact would be dissolved. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council and access to all our technology and trade networks. It was everything humanity had wanted for 50 years. The chance to leave their solar system, to explore the galaxy, to take their place among the stars. All they had to do was fight and die against an enemy that had already defeated the galaxy's greatest civilizations. We need time to discuss this proposal, Li Kyung said. Time is not a luxury we possess, replied an Orion delegate. The Devourers do not pause their advance for negotiations. How much time? Li Kyung asked. The Outer Rim colonies have perhaps 6 months before the Devourers reach them. If we are to organize a defense, it must begin immediately. Dr. So-min stood up next to Li Kyung. We understand the urgency. But humanity has been isolated for 50 years. We need to prepare our people for what you're asking. And we need to study your enemy, Commander Park Jun added. If we're going to fight these Devourers, we need to understand them better than your forces have. Several delegates began talking at once, their voices rising in what sounded like panic. The translation system struggled to keep up, producing fragments of argument and debate. An acceptable delay came through clearly. Time grows short, followed another voice. The outer colonies cannot wait, added a third. Li Kyung held up his hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, he spoke in the clear, firm voice he had learned during his diplomatic training. Give us 2 weeks to return to Earth and consult with our government. We will give you our answer then? 2 weeks may be too long, warned a hegemony delegate. Then you better hope it isn't, Li Kyung replied as the human delegation prepared to leave the chamber. Li Kyung caught fragments of conversation from the alien delegates. Most of it was in languages the translation system couldn't handle, but the tone was clear. Some delegates sounded relieved that humanity might help them. Others sounded terrified of what they were about to unleash. Walking back to their ship, Dr. So-min voiced what they were all thinking. They're more afraid of us than they are of the Devourers. Maybe they should be, Park Jun said quietly. Li Kyung said nothing, but he wondered if humanity was about to make a deal that would save the galaxy or damn it. Either way, the choice would be theirs to make. Dr. So-min stared at the biological sample floating in the containment field, her stomach churning with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. The piece of devourer tissue had been recovered from a destroyed scout ship 3 days ago, and it was unlike anything in her 20 years of studying alien life forms. It's still alive, she said to the research team gathered around the lab table. After being separated from the main organism for 72 hours, exposed to hard vacuum, and subjected to temperatures that should have killed any known life form, it's still alive and trying to grow. Engineer Kim Dae-yoon adjusted the scanning equipment, her face pale in the blue light of the containment field. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever this thing is made of, it's converting background radiation into usable energy. It's literally feeding on space itself. That explains how they can travel between star systems without stopping, said Commander Park Jun. He had been studying the tactical reports from the failed alien battles for the past week, and the conclusions were disturbing. They don't need supply lines or fuel depots. They are their own supply lines. Ambassador Li Kyung entered the lab carrying a sealed communication device. His expression was grim. I just finished talking with the President and the Joint Chiefs. They want to know what we're really dealing with before making any decisions. Somin gestured at the sample. This is what we're dealing with. A life form that can survive in any environment, feeds on energy itself, and adapts to threats faster than we can understand. The aliens weren't exaggerating when they said conventional weapons become useless after the first engagement. Show him the analysis from the battle recordings. Park Jun said, So Dashmin activated a holographic display showing the Devourer's adaptive responses during combat. Watch this sequence from the third battle. The Orion fleet starts with plasma cannons. First volley causes significant damage, second volley less damage. By the fourth volley, the plasma is being absorbed and converted into energy for the creatures. Own weapons. Li Kyung watched the recording with growing alarm. How long between adaptation cycles? Minutes, Gullion said. Sometimes less. They're not just learning to resist the weapons, they're learning to use them. The door to the lab opened and Captain Hanwol entered with 2 other officers. His face was set in the expression he wore when delivering bad news. We've been monitoring alien communications, Hanwol said without preamble. The situation is worse than they told us at the council meeting. How much worse? Li Kyung asked. 3 more star systems have gone dark in the past week. And we've intercepted classified communications between several council members. They're not planning to fight alongside us. They're planning to use us as a delaying action while they evacuate their core worlds. The silence in the lab was broken only by the humming of the containment field. Somin felt her hands clench into fists. They want us to buy them time with our lives. It gets worse, Hanwol continued. According to the communications, some council members are advocating for declaring human space as a sacrifice zone. They want to evacuate their outer colonies and use our solar system as bait to slow down the Devourers. Park Jun's voice was dangerously quiet. They want to feed Earth to these things. The proposal hasn't been approved yet, Hanwol said. But the vote is scheduled for next week. Whether humanity agrees to help or not? Li Kyung moved to the window overlooking Earth's blue surface far below. The monitoring station had become their war room, the place where humanity would decide its future. What are our options? We could refuse their offer, Dayan suggested. Stay in our solar system and hope the Devourers never reach us. That's not really an option, Somin said, still studying the tissue sample. Based on the consumption rate, they'll reach human space within 8 years whether we fight them or not. Maybe sooner if they continue to accelerate. We could accept their terms and fight as they want us to, Park Jun said. Use their ships, their weapons, their tactics. Probably die in the first major engagement, but at least we'd die free. Or, Hanwol said slowly, we could fight on our own terms. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what he meant, but no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Finally, Li Kyung spoke. You're talking about abandoning the Galactic Pact entirely, fighting this war as an independent human force. I'm talking about fighting to win, Hanwol replied. Not fighting to buy time or minimize casualties or preserve galactic civilization. Fighting to completely destroy an enemy that threatens our species. Somin looked up from her research station. The aliens can't think that way. Their entire civilization is built on cooperation, efficiency, minimal losses. They've never faced an enemy that required total commitment. But we have, Park Jun said. Every day for millions of years. Earth taught us that sometimes survival means being willing to lose everything to defeat your enemy. De Yun was running calculations on her tablet. If we fought independently, we'd need to build our own fleet, our own weapons, develop our own tactics without alien interference. Could we do it in time? Li Kyung asked. Maybe, Yun said, but not with conventional technology. We'd need to use what we've learned from studying the Devourers themselves. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. To fight the Devourers effectively, humanity would have to become something like them. Adaptive, ruthless, willing to consume whatever resources were necessary for victory. There's something else, So-Min said quietly. She had been analyzing the devourer tissue while they talked, and new data was appearing on her screens. I don't think these things are natural evolution. The biological structure is too perfect, too purposeful. Someone made them? Made them for what? Hanwol asked. I'm not sure yet, but look at this genetic sequence. She highlighted a section of the analysis. It's almost like a computer program written in DNA, and this part here, it looks like a test protocol. Park Jun leaned closer to the display. A test for what? I think, So-Min said slowly, they're testing us. Testing the galaxy to see if we're worthy of survival. And every species that fails the test gets consumed. The room was so quiet they could hear the air recycling systems in the walls. If So-Min was right, then the Devourers weren't just an enemy to be defeated. They were a judgment to be passed. What kind of test? Li Kyung asked. The kind that measures how far a species will go to survive, So-Min replied. The aliens have failed because they're too civilized. They won't pay the price necessary to win. But we will, Hanwol said. It wasn't a question. The question is whether we should, Li Kyung said. If we fight this war the way it needs to be fought, we might save the galaxy. But what will we become in the process? Yun looked up from her calculations. We'll become what we've always been, survivors. The galaxy is afraid of us for good reason, Park Jun added. Maybe it's time to show them they were right to be afraid. So-Min turned back to the Devourer sample, watching it pulse with alien life. If we do this, there's no going back. Once we start fighting like Deathworlders, the galaxy will never see us as anything else. Good, Hanwol said. Let them see what happens when they try to use us and throw us away. Li Kyung activated the communication device. I'll send our response to the council. We'll fight their war, but not as their servants. We'll fight as humans with human methods for human survival. And if they don't like our methods? Yun asked. Then they can face the Devourers alone, Li Kyung replied, outside the lab window. Earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that its children were about to unleash themselves upon the galaxy. For better or worse, humanity was choosing to become exactly what the universe feared most. Deathworlders without restraint, fighting for survival against an enemy that demanded nothing less than everything they could give. The shipyard around Mars had never been so busy. What had once been a small facility for repairing mining vessels now stretched across hundreds of kilometers of space, filled with the sound of cutting torches and the flash of welding lights. Engineer Kim Dae-in floated in zero gravity near the hull of humanity's first true warship, watching teams of workers install weapons that no civilized species would ever consider building. The plasma cannons are ready for testing, reported Chief Engineer Park Min-ho through her comm unit. But I have to tell you, these things violate about 30 different galactic treaties on acceptable weapons. Good, Dian replied, checking the power readings on her tablet. If the galaxy wanted us to follow their rules, they shouldn't have asked us to save them. The ship taking shape around her was unlike anything humans had built before. Where alien vessels were sleek and efficient, this one was brutal and functional. Where alien ships tried to minimize casualties, this one was designed to maximize damage. It looked like what it was, a weapon built by a species that understood that sometimes the only way to preserve life was to be very good at ending it. Dr. So-Min's voice crackled through the comm system from her laboratory deep inside the ship. You need to see this. We've made a breakthrough with the devourer tissue analysis. Dae-Yun pushed off from the hull and glided through the ship's corridors toward the biolab. The walls were lined with displays showing technical specifications, battle plans, and most disturbing of all, genetic sequences taken from their enemy. Humanity wasn't just building weapons to fight the Devourers. They were learning from them. Biolab was a sterile chamber filled with containment fields and analysis equipment. So-Min stood before a large display showing a three-dimensional model of Devourer. DNA, her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were red from working without sleep, but her voice was excited. Look at this, she said, pointing to a section of the genetic code. I was wrong about the devourers being a test. They're not testing us to see if we're worthy of survival. They're testing us to see if we're worthy of inheritance. Jung studied the display. The genetic patterns were incredibly complex, but certain sections seemed almost familiar. Inheritance of what? Everything, Somin said. The entire galaxy. These creatures weren't designed to destroy civilizations. They were designed to clear the galaxy of species that couldn't evolve beyond peaceful cooperation. They're making room for something new. For us, Yoon said, understanding flooding through her. For any species capable of total commitment to survival? The Devourers were created by another Deathworld species, probably millions of years ago. They left these things behind as a final test before they moved on to whatever comes next. Commander Park Jun's voice came through the ships. Communication system. All senior staff report to the command center. We have incoming traffic from the Galactic Council. Yoon and So-min made their way to the command center, a circular room at the heart of the warship. Captain Han-wol stood before a massive display. Screen showing the tactical situation across the galaxy. Red zones marked Devourer-controlled space, and the red was spreading faster than ever. What's the situation? Yoon asked. The Council is panicking, Han-wol replied. 5 more star systems went dark yesterday. The Devourers have accelerated their advance and changed their attack patterns. They're no longer just consuming systems randomly. They're targeting military installations and shipyards. Park Jun activated a recording of the latest council session. Alien voices filled the room, most of them speaking in urgent, frightened tones that needed no translation. They're demanding that we deploy immediately, Park Jun said. With whatever ships we have ready. They want us to attack the Devourer advance fleet before it reaches the Centauri colonies? How many ships do we have operational? Han-wol asked. 12, Yoon replied. But they're not fully tested. The new weapon systems could fail. The bio-integrated armor might not work properly. We need at least another month. We don't have another month, So-min said, studying the tactical display. Look at the pattern. The Devourers aren't just randomly destroying systems anymore. They're learning about galactic military doctrine and adapting their strategy to counter it. She highlighted several points on the display. They hit the Veltar shipyards first, eliminating their ability to build new vessels. Then they destroyed the Orion research stations, cutting off technological development. Now they're targeting the hegemony supply depots. They're not just adapting the weapons, Park Jun realized. They're adapting to military strategy itself. Han-wol nodded grimly. Which means every day we wait, they get smarter about how to fight galactic civilization. But we're not galactic civilization, Yoon said. We're something else entirely. The truth of that statement was evident throughout the ship. Where alien vessels relied on energy shields and long-range weapons, human ships used armor that could repair itself and weapons designed for close combat. Where alien tactics focused on preserving ships and crews, human doctrine accepted massive casualties in exchange for mission success. There's something else, So-min said, pulling up new data on her tablet. I've been analyzing the genetic patterns in the Devourer tissue, and I think I know how to communicate with them. The command center fell silent. The idea of communicating with the Devourers had never occurred to anyone. They were seen as mindless consumers, driven by hunger rather than intelligence. They're not mindless, So-min continued. They're following a program, yes, but it's a complex one. If we can interface with their biological systems, we might be able to understand their true purpose. Or we might let them learn everything about us, Park Jun warned. That's a risk, So-min admitted. But if I'm right about them being a test, then maybe there's a way to pass the test without destroying them. Han-wol considered this. And if you're wrong, then we fight them the way we plan to fight them. With everything we have, holding nothing back. Yoon was running calculations on her tablet. If we're going to try communication, we need to do it soon. The bio-interface system I've been developing could work, but it requires direct contact with a living devourer. That means getting close enough to touch one of those things, Park Jun said. Close enough to merge with one, So-min corrected. The interface system isn't just communication, it's integration. Whoever uses it will become part human, part devourer, at least temporarily. The implications of that hit everyone in the room at the same time. To understand their enemy, humanity would have to become their enemy. To pass the test, they would have to accept transformation into something the galaxy had never seen before. I'll do it, Daeun said quietly. No, Hanwol replied immediately. We need you to keep the ships running. I'll do it, So-min said. It's my research, my responsibility. You're too valuable, Park Jun said. If something goes wrong, we lose everything we've learned about the Devourers. Hanwol looked around the command center at the faces of his officers. They were all volunteers, all people who had chosen to be here instead of staying safely on Earth, all people who understood that sometimes survival required sacrifices that civilized species couldn't make. We'll decide who interfaces with the Devourers when the time comes, he said finally. Right now, we need to focus on getting our ships ready for combat. Whether we communicate with them or destroy them, we need to be prepared for war. The Council is still demanding immediate deployment, Park Jun reminded them. Tell the Council that humans don't take orders, Hanwol replied. We'll deploy when we're ready, where we choose to deploy, and we'll fight this war our way. And if they threaten to withdraw their support? Daeun asked. Then we'll remind them that they need us more than we need them, Hanwol said. The galaxy spent 50 years trying to contain us. Now they want us to save them. They don't get to choose how we do it. Outside the command center, the shipyard continued its frantic work. Humans were building weapons that would either save galactic civilization or replace it entirely. Either way, the choice would be humanity's to make, and they would make it as they had always made their most important decisions, by being willing to risk everything for survival. The alarms screaming through the human colony on Kepler 442b had been going for 6 hours straight. Captain Hanwol stood in the command bunker deep beneath New Seoul, watching the tactical displays as 3 massive Devourer bioships approached the planet's outer atmosphere. Each one was larger than a city, their writhing forms pulsing with dark energy that made the displays flicker and distort. Evacuation status? Hanwol asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. 30% complete, reported Commander Park Jun from his position at the tactical station. But the civilian transports are moving too slowly. The Devourers will reach orbital bombardment range in 4 hours. Then we stop them before they get there, Hanwol said. Doctor. So-min looked up from her analysis station, her face pale but determined. The bio readings are unlike anything we've seen before. These creatures have adapted since their last engagement with galactic forces. They're bigger, more heavily armored, and their energy output suggests weapons we haven't encountered yet. Good, said Engineer Kim Daeun from her position monitoring the human fleet. That means they haven't fought us yet. Hanwol activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Volf Leader. Execute attack pattern Delta. Remember, we're not here to have a civilized battle. We're here to kill these things before they kill us. 12 human warships accelerated toward the approaching Devourers, their hulls gleaming with bio-integrated armor that pulsed like living tissue. Unlike the sleek vessels of galactic civilization, these ships look like predators, angular, aggressive, built for close-quarters violence rather than elegant long-range combat. Volf Leader, this is Volf 7, came the voice of Captain Lee Min-jun over the com. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the lead Devourer. It's charging some kind of weapon. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Hanwol ordered. Don't give them clean targeting solutions. The Devourer weapon fired a moment later, sending a beam of pure darkness across space that would have vaporized any ship it touched. But the human vessels didn't try to absorb the impact with shields or armor. Instead, they twisted out of the way with movements that seemed almost organic, their bio-integrated systems allowing them to change direction faster than conventional ships could manage. Volf Leader, The middle devourer is launching smaller organisms, reported Volf 3. Looks like fighters or drones. Hanwol watched his tactical display fill with red dots representing the enemy fighters. There were hundreds of them, each one the size of a small ship, swarming toward the human fleet like angry insects. In any normal engagement, being outnumbered 50 to 1 would mean certain death. All ships, ignore the fighters, Hanwol commanded. Target the big ones. Show these things what deathworlders do when someone threatens our territory. The human ships accelerated directly toward the massive devourer bioships, passing through the swarm of fighters without slowing down. The smaller organisms tried to attach themselves to the human hulls, but the bio-integrated armor responded by generating electrical fields that fried anything that made contact. Volf leader, I'm getting close-range scans of the lead devourer, Somin reported from the science station. The hull isn't solid, it's more like a living membrane. There are vulnerable points where the bioelectric systems connect. Mark them on the tactical display, Hanwol said. All ships target the connection points. Let's see how well these things work when we cut their power. Volf 7, commanded by Captain Li Min-jun, reached the lead devourer first. Instead of firing from a safe distance like galactic forces would have done, the human ship dove straight at the creature's hull, its weapons blazing at point-blank range. The devourer's membrane buckled and tore under the assault, spilling bioelectric fluid into space. But instead of retreating, Volf 7 did something that made even Hanwol's experienced crew gasp in shock. Volf 7, what are you doing? Park Jun demanded. Ram attack, came Li Min-chun's calm reply. If close range is good, then no range is better. Volf 7 slammed into the devourer's hull at full speed, its reinforced prow punching through the creature's membrane and deep into its internal organs. The impact would have destroyed any normal ship, but human vessels were built to survive what they had to do to win. The devourer convulsed in agony, its massive form writhing as bioelectric systems failed throughout its body. Dark fluid poured from the wound, and the creature's energy output began to fluctuate wildly. All ships, follow Volf 7's lead, Hanwol ordered. Get inside these things and tear them apart from within. What followed was not a battle in any civilized sense. It was butchery on a scale that the galaxy had never seen. Human ships rammed through devourer hulls, fired weapons while buried inside their enemies' bodies, and turned every engagement into a close-quarters death struggle that left both sides bleeding. Volf 4 is taking heavy damage, reported Volf 9. Their bioarmor is failing. Volf 4, this is Volf leader, Hanwol called. Can you maintain combat effectiveness? Negative, Volf leader, came the reply from Captain Kim Tae-ho. Hull? Breach in 3 sections, life support failing. But I've got a clear shot at this thing's central nervous system. Hanwol knew what Kim Tae-ho was asking permission to do. It was a tactic that no galactic species would ever consider, because it required accepting the total loss of ship and crew in exchange for maximum damage to the enemy. Authorized, Volf 4, make it count. Volf 4's final transmission was a single word, boom. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. Volf 4 had detonated its reactor while buried deep inside the second devourer's body, turning both ship and creature into a ball of superheated plasma that could be seen from the planet's surface. 2 down, 1 to go, Dayun reported, though. Her voice was shaky. They had just watched 30 humans die in the most violent way imaginable, and everyone knew it might not be the last time. The remaining devourer had learned from watching its companions die. Instead of trying to fight the human ships at close range, it began to retreat, pulling back toward deep space while launching everything it had at the approaching humans. It's running, Park Jun said with surprise. No, So-min corrected, studying. Her bio readings? It's adapting, learning. This is what makes them so dangerous. Every engagement teaches them how to fight us better. Then we don't give it the chance to learn, Hanwol said. All remaining ships, maximum acceleration. Take that thing down before it gets away? The chase that followed lasted 3 hours and covered millions of kilometers. The Devourer was fast, but human ships were desperate, and desperation made them push their bio-integrated systems beyond safe limits. One by one, the remaining human vessels caught up to their prey and began the brutal work of tearing it apart. When it was over, 3 Devourer bioships were dead and drifting in space, their massive forms slowly breaking apart as their bioelectric systems failed. Of the 12 human ships that had started the battle, only 7 remained functional. The cost had been enormous by any civilized standard. By human standards, it had been a complete victory. "This is Volf Leader to New Soul Command," Hanwell reported as his damaged ship limped back toward the planet. "Devourer threat eliminated. Colony is secure." "Copy that, Volf Leader," came So-Min's voice from the planet's surface. "But we're receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council. They're demanding an explanation for our excessive use of force and unacceptable casualty rates." Hanwell looked around his bridge at the surviving crew members. They were bloody, exhausted, and traumatized by what they had just done. They were also alive, and so were the 2 million civilians on the planet below. "Tell the Council," Hanwell said slowly, "that this is how humans fight. If they don't like our methods, they're welcome to come out here and try their own." In the wreckage, floating around Kepler 442b, something unprecedented had happened. For the first time since their creation, the Devourers had encountered an enemy that refused to be consumed quietly. An enemy that embraced mutual destruction rather than accept defeat. An enemy that fought like the Deathworld species that had created the Devourers in the first place. The test was beginning to change, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when they asked Deathworlders to save them. The planet sanctuary had been evacuated 3 days ago, but Commander Park Jun could still see the fires burning from orbit. What had once been a garden world with crystal cities and floating parks was now a wasteland of smoke and ash. The human fleet had saved 8 million alien civilians, but the cost of that salvation was becoming clear to everyone watching. "Final casualty report from the surface teams," announced Captain Hanwell from the flagship's command center. His voice was steady, but Park Jun could hear the exhaustion underneath. They had been fighting the Devourers for 6 months now, and every victory came at a price that made the galaxy flinch. "How bad?" asked Dr. So-Min from her station. She had been analyzing Devourer biomatter recovered from the battle, trying to understand why these creatures kept getting stronger with each engagement. 40% of the planet's surface is uninhabitable," Hanwell reported. "The Devourer infestation was so deep that we had to use plasma bombardment to burn it out completely. 3 human ships were lost when they rammed the primary biomass to prevent it from escaping." Engineer Kim Dae-young looked up from her technical displays. "The bio-integration systems are working better than expected. Our ships are adapting to Devourer attacks almost as fast as they adapt to us. But the mental strain on the crews is getting worse." Park Jun knew what she meant. The bio-integrated armor and weapons that made human ships so effective against the Devourers came with a cost. The systems required a mental connection between ship and crew that left permanent changes in human brain chemistry. The longer a crew spent connected to their ship, the less human they became. "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," announced the communications officer. "Priority Alpha. They're demanding immediate contact with the fleet commander." Hanwell activated the communication system, and the main display filled with alien faces. Park Jun recognized several of them from the council meetings, but their expressions were very different now. Where once there had been desperation and hope, now there was fear and disgust. "Captain Hanwell," spoke an Orion delegate, its crystalline form flickering with agitated light patterns. "The Council has reviewed your recent actions at Sanctuary, and we must express our grave concerns about your methods." "My methods saved 8 million lives," Hanwell replied coldly. "Your methods destroyed an entire planet," snapped a Veltar representative. "The ecological damage will take centuries to repair. The cultural artifacts lost were irreplaceable. You have violated every treaty governing the conduct of interstellar warfare." Park Jun felt his hands clench into fists. They had spent 3 days fighting bio-horrors that defied every natural law, watching their friends die in ways that would give nightmares to civilized minds, all to save people who were now complaining about the mess left behind. Would you prefer we had let the Devourers consume the planet entirely? Somin asked, her voice dangerously quiet. We would prefer you follow established protocols for planetary defense, replied a hegemony delegate. Surgical strikes, minimal collateral damage, preservation of infrastructure and cultural sites. Those protocols don't work against the Devourers, Dine said. We've tried them. They result in total planetary consumption and 0 survivors. Then perhaps, said the Orion delegate, it is time to consider alternative solutions. Negotiation. Perhaps, or strategic withdrawal to more defensible positions. The silence that followed was so complete that Park Jun could hear his own heartbeat. Finally, Hanwol spoke in a voice that made the air in the command center feel colder. You want us to negotiate with creatures that exist only to consume and adapt. You want us to withdraw and let them have entire star systems. You want us to lose this war politely. We want you to remember that you are fighting to preserve civilization, the Veltar delegate said, not to replace it with something worse. That was when Park Jun understood what was really happening. The Galactic Council wasn't just concerned about human methods. They were terrified of what humanity was becoming in the process of fighting this war. Every battle made human ships more bio-integrated, more alien, more dangerous. Every victory proved that Deathworlders could do things that civilized species couldn't even contemplate. There's something else, the Orion delegate continued. We have received reports that human forces are beginning to change. That prolonged exposure to bio-integration technology is altering your species in fundamental ways. Somin's expression darkened. Our crews are adapting to the demands of combat. That's what survival requires. You are becoming something other than human. The Veltar delegate said bluntly. Your ship crews show brain patterns that we cannot classify. Your combat responses are becoming more similar to the Devourers themselves with each engagement. And that terrifies you, Park Jun said, understanding flooding through him. Yes, the hegemony delegate admitted. It terrifies us greatly. We asked you to fight the Devourers, not to become them. Hanwol stood up slowly, his movements carrying a predatory grace that hadn't been there 6 months ago. The bio-integration was changing him too, Park Jun realized. Changing all of them. You have a choice to make, Hanwol said to the council. You can accept that this war requires methods and sacrifices that your civilized minds cannot understand. Or you can relieve human forces of duty and face the Devourers with your own fleets. We cannot win this war alone, the Orion delegate said quietly. Then stop complaining about how we win it for you, Dine snapped. The Veltar delegate's antennae twitched nervously. There must be limits. Lines that cannot be crossed. Otherwise, what separates us from the monsters we fight? The monsters we fight don't leave survivors, Somin said. We do. That's the only line that matters. But for how much longer? The hegemony delegate asked. How long before human forces decide that alien civilians are acceptable casualties? How long before you decide that the galaxy itself needs to be consumed and rebuilt according to your vision? Park Jun felt something cold settle in his stomach. The delegates weren't wrong to be afraid. Every human crew was changing, becoming something that could interface with bio-integrated technology, something that could think like the Devourers. Thought, something that could win this war. The Council has reached a decision, the Orion delegate announced. Human forces will be placed under direct galactic command. You will follow our strategic directives and use only approved weapons and tactics. The silence stretched for long seconds. When Hanwol finally spoke, his voice carried harmonics that Park Jun had never heard from a human throat. No, this is not a request, the Veltar delegate said. This is a direct order from the Galactic Council. The Galactic Council has no authority over human forces, Hanwol replied. We agreed to fight your war. We never agreed to fight it your way. Then you are in violation of every treaty and agreement that governs civilized warfare, the hegemony delegate said. Good, So-Min said. Civilized warfare is why you were losing. Diane activated her tactical displays, showing the current strategic situation. 43 star systems saved by human intervention. 0 systems saved by galactic forces operating under traditional protocols. The numbers speak for themselves. The Council will not support forces that refuse to accept galactic authority, the Orion delegate warned. The Council will continue to provide intelligence, logistics, and supply support, Hanwell said. And there was something in his voice that made it sound less like a request and more like a statement of fact. And if we refuse? The Veltar delegate asked. Park Jun saw Hanwell smile, and the expression was nothing like a human smile. Then you'll learn what happens when Deathworlders decide you're part of the problem instead of part of the solution. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the human command crew alone with the reality of what they had just done. They had severed their ties with galactic civilization and chosen to fight this war as an independent force. So now what? Diane asked. Now we win this war, Hanwell said. On our terms, with our methods for our survival. Outside the flagship, the human fleet continued its patrol of the dead system, their bio-integrated hulls pulsing with alien light. They were no longer quite human, but they were still alive. In a war against extinction, that was the only victory that mattered. Engineer Kim Dae-yoon stood in the bio-integration chamber deep within the flagship, staring at the writhing mass of devourer tissue that would either kill her or transform her into something the galaxy had never seen. The chamber walls pulsed with organic light, as she could feel the ship's biosystems responding to her presence like a living creature recognizing its partner. Are you certain about this? Dr. So-Min asked through the communication system. Her voice carried harmonics that proved the bio-integration had changed her too, making her vocal cords resonate with frequencies that could interface directly with alien technology. The only way to understand them completely is to become one of them, Yoon replied, placing her hand on the bio-integration console. The partial connections we've been using aren't enough. We need full merger. Captain Hanwell's voice joined the conversation from the command center. The Devourer fleet will reach the galactic core in 6 hours. If we're going to stop them, it has to be now. Yoon looked through the chamber's transparent wall at the tactical display showing the final battle. Hundreds of Devourer bioships, each one the size of a moon, were approaching the heart of galactic civilization. They had learned from every previous engagement, adapted to every weapon, evolved beyond anything the galaxy could fight with conventional methods. The human fleet that opposed them was tiny by comparison. Only 37 ships remained from the original hundreds, but each one had been transformed by months of bio-integration. Their hulls breathed, their weapons grew, their crews had become something that was no longer quite human but was still alive. Integration sequence beginning? Announced the ship's biocomputer in a voice that sounded like a blend of human and devourer. Communication patterns? Yoon felt the biotendrils enter her bloodstream, carrying genetic material that would rewrite her DNA in real time. The pain was incredible, but she had expected that. What she hadn't expected was the sudden flood of memories that weren't her own. She saw the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago, when another Deathworld species had faced the same choice that humanity faced now. She saw them create the Devourers as a test for future civilizations, a way to determine which species could evolve beyond the limitations of peaceful cooperation. She saw the truth that Dr. So-Min had suspected but never proven. The Devourers weren't destroyers. They were gardeners, clearing away species that couldn't adapt to survive in a universe where cooperation wasn't always enough. Integration at 40%, the biocomputer reported. Subject experiencing full memory transfer from Devourer. Genetic archives. Through the Devourer memories, Daein saw what the original Deathworld species had become after creating their test. They had transcended physical existence entirely, becoming beings of pure energy and information who moved between dimensions. Like humans moved between rooms, They had left the galaxy behind because they had outgrown it, but not before ensuring that their successors would be chosen through trial by extinction. Integration at 70%, the biocomputer announced, subject achieving full biomechanical fusion. Dayun could feel her consciousness expanding, connecting not just with the ship, but with every bio-integrated human in the fleet. They were becoming a collective intelligence, a hive mind that retained individual personalities while sharing knowledge and capabilities. She could sense Commander Park Jun directing the fleet's tactical movements, his thoughts flowing through the bio network like digital signals. She could feel Captain Hanwol's determination as he coordinated with other ship commanders, his mind linked to theirs through the same bio-integration that was transforming them all. Integration complete, the biocomputer announced. Subject has achieved full synthesis with Devourer biotechnology. Dayun opened her eyes, but her vision was no longer limited to human senses. She could see energy patterns, bioelectric fields, the quantum fluctuations that connected all living things. When she spoke, her voice carried frequencies that could communicate directly with Devourer bioships. "I can control them," she said, her words reaching every human in the fleet through the bio network. The Devourers aren't independent entities. They're tools, weapons created to test and select. With full integration, I can reprogram their base functions. "Do it," Hanwol commanded through the network. Yun reached out with her transformed consciousness, touching the minds of the approaching Devourer fleet. They recognized her immediately, not as an enemy, but as something they had been programmed to acknowledge. A successful candidate for inheritance, the massive bioships stopped their advance, their weapons powering down as Dayun's commands overrode their base programming. For the first time since their creation, the Devourers faced something that could speak to them in their own language. "Galactic Council ships are requesting orders," Park Jun reported through the bio network. "They want to know whether to attack, while the Devourers are stationary." "Tell them to hold position," Hanwol replied. "This isn't their fight anymore." Through the bio network, Dayun could sense the fear radiating from the galactic forces. They were watching humanity communicate with creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for months, seeing their supposed saviors reveal themselves as something alien and terrifying. "The Devourers are offering us a choice," Yun announced to the fleet. "We can take control of their entire network, command every bioship in the galaxy, become the inheritors that the original Deathworld species intended, or we can destroy them and remain what we are." "What's the cost of taking control?" So Min asked. "Complete transformation. We would become something that could manage galactic evolution, guide the development of species, decide which civilizations survive and which ones don't. We would become gods, essentially." The silence that followed stretched across the bio network as every human in the fleet considered the implications. They could save the galaxy by becoming its rulers, or they could remain human and face an uncertain future. "And if we destroy them?" Hanwol asked. "The test ends. The galaxy survives. But we remain what we've become, bio-integrated humans who are no longer fully human but aren't gods either." Park Jun's thoughts flowed through the network, analytical and precise. "The galaxy will never trust us after this. They've seen what we can become when we need to survive. They'll spend the rest of their existence trying to contain us again." "Let them try," Somin's mental voice carried amusement. "We're not the same species they locked away 50 years ago." Dayun could feel the consensus building through the bio network. Humanity had spent millions of years learning to survive on a deathworld that tried to kill them every day. They had evolved to be adaptable, aggressive, willing to do whatever was necessary to preserve their species. They weren't ready to become gods, but they also weren't willing to remain prisoners. "Destroy the Devourers," Hanwol commanded through the network, "all of them. Every bioship, every fragment of tissue, every trace of their existence, end the test permanently." Dayun reached out through the bio network, her transformed consciousness touching every devourer in the galaxy. She spoke to them in their own language, using command frequencies that had been programmed into them by their creators. Test concluded. Final directive, self-termination protocol activated. Across the galaxy, hundreds of Devourer bioships began to break apart as their own systems turned against them. The creatures that had terrorized civilized space for months dissolved into harmless organic matter. Their threat ended not by superior firepower, but by someone who understood their true nature. "It's done," Diyun announced. "The Devourers are gone. The test is over. And now?" Park Jun asked. Hunwol's mental voice carried certainty and something that might have been satisfaction. "Now we decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. The Terran Containment Pact burned away the day we chose to fight this war our way. The galaxy wanted Deathworlders to save them. They got us instead." Through the bio-network, Dayun could sense human ships spreading out across former Devourer territory. Their crews changed by months of bio-integration, but still recognizably human. They were no longer the species that had been locked away in their home system. But they weren't monsters either. They were something new, the survivors of a test that had claimed entire civilizations, the inheritors of a galaxy that would never be the same. The choice had been made not in a moment of violence, but in the quiet decision to remain human while becoming something more. The Deathworlders had chosen, and the galaxy would learn to live with the consequences.